Hi everyone, welcome to panel session 2. I am Melissa from Melissa Lim and Associates, and our topic here today is legal innovation in law firms. So far, we've heard about how the pandemic had forced innovation adoption in the legal industry. And it's an interesting word, forced, because it suggests that the legal industry is reluctant to innovate or embrace new measures until and unless it is made absolutely necessary. But I think that it is a good catalyst for legal tech, and it provides an opportunity to stakeholders to prove themselves in the face of these challenging times. So in this panel session, we will be talking about how law firms had raised above the disruption brought by the pandemic and whether the measures adopted by the law firms are sustainable. So together with me today are 5 speakers from various backgrounds. We have Mauricio, from the Chief Operating Officer of A2J Tech, a social enterprise legal tech service provider. And we have Aditya, local partner in Singapore for the global law firm White & Case. Shanice, the legal innovation advisor at Create Plus 65, an innovation lab created by Clifford in Singapore. We have Hsiang, co-head Linklaters, Linklaters Nakota-Asia, a tech startup within the global law firm Linklaters, and Maurice, the founder and Legal Tech Japan, a legal tech news portal in Japan, and a recruiter for Baker McKenzie in Hong Kong. So thank you everyone for participating here, especially Mauricio, who is at 1 a.m. right now at his time. So are you excited about this session? I think we have about 14 people attending here right now. Hi, Adeline. So let's start by sharing your thoughts on the innovation adaptability of law firms during this movement restriction procedure, because we are all in different jurisdiction and jurisdiction have their own movement restriction protocol. So what do you think about the innovation adaptability of the law firms in this time? Shall we start with Aditya?
Thank you, Melissa. Pleasure to be here today, seeing to you all and sharing this platform with you. Look, I think the point has already been made that technology and innovation have been on the horizon now for many years. They've often been thrown around as buzzwords. But what the pandemic has done is that it has crystallized the need for technology and innovation more quickly and decisively than anyone could have imagined even at the start of last year. But I think from my perspective, the key point is that the firms and individuals that perhaps most effectively managed their businesses during the crisis were those that already had been engaged in serious efforts at leveraging technology in law practice. In that sense, it was merely an opportunity to activate your plans that had been tried and tested. It was not a wake-up call for trying something completely new. So for instance, at White & Case, fortunately, issues of technology and innovation have been front and center for the last many years. So it was relatively easier for us to accelerate, right? We didn't have to, start the engine, so to say, in the middle of a crisis, because that is always more challenging. So I think the key takeaway from my point of view is that, in moments of adversity, it is always hard to innovate from scratch, but it's very useful to already have plans in place. And the most, the firms that benefited from this the most were those that already had these plans in motion and were talking about technology and innovation long before the pandemic hit.
Thank you very much. I will circle back to that because I will be speaking from the Malaysian perspective. So let's hear from your Singaporean, Shanice. Can you jump in on this? What's your thought?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Melissa. I think the movement control restrictions definitely challenged a number of traditional ways of working. So like wedding signing, in-person meetings, and even court hearings, they were all disrupted. So as Aditya mentioned, and I echo his views, for firms who had treated digitization as a priority pre-pandemic, they were in a place where they had appropriate infrastructure ready, and they were able to provide a more business as usual working relationship with their clients. So I would even go a step further and say that these firms were not only able to transition to collaborating with their clients virtually. So for instance, setting up online collaboration platforms with file sharing, transaction management, or e-signature technologies. But these firms were actually able to go a step further and, certain opportunities within the crisis. So some of them actually were able to put their legal tech tools into practice, like AI-enabled document review solutions. And some of them were also able to, take this opportunity to develop client-facing tools to help their clients navigate certain complexities. So like return to work toolkits or coronavirus insurance toolkits. So in essence, for firms that already had a consistent innovation strategy, the pandemic was an excellent proof of its value.
I totally agree with that. But again, I will come back to you from the Malaysian point of view. Maurice, how about you? What do you see in Japan and Hong Kong?
Yeah, so for this portion, I'll speak from the perspective of Japan. I just roll my eyes, but I think coming out of the pandemic, you'll see a lot more innovation and a lot more focus on technology. Pre-pandemic, Japan was very slow. And I think that the biggest thing that happened during the pandemic was e-signatures, right? Before Japan, mostly still using the hanko, you had to have real paper, you had to stamp the paper in order to close the deal. But during the pandemic, e-signature and doing online signing of contracts drastically improved. And I think one of the local Japanese companies, its stock value just went way up during the pandemic due to the increase in e-signatures. But the thing about it that will help is in order to get the technology, you got to change your people and processes. You can't add technology to a bad process, right? And that's why adoption is sometimes hard, is because the process itself and the people aren't ready to take the technology. So even if you have the technology or you're using technological solutions, the adoption is not there because you're not changing the people, you're not changing the processes. Whereas during the pandemic, not being able to go to work, not being able to do live meetings, a lot more emphasis on video meetings, on phone calls. I think that that's starting to change the mindsets of the people, particularly the lawyers here in Japan, on how things can be done or how things should be done. And that's setting and laying the foundations for changes in processes so that as we come out of the pandemic, they will already have some new behaviors and they can use that to bring in the technology and bring in the innovation. So I will say I'm cautiously optimistic. Anyone that knows Japan moves very, very, very slow. So hopefully this will help it kind of speed things up, but we'll see.
Thank you very much, Maurice. I think Malaysia may not be too far off from Japan, as you mentioned just now, but I'm very interested to know about the e-signature later. Maybe we could circle back to that. Mauricio, how about you? How is Guatemala?
Yeah, I would say I have two different focuses, one in the US and one in Latin America. Let's first talk about the perspective of law firms in Latin America that I've witnessed. And I would say with the pandemic, there was necessarily a need, like everyone has said, of incorporating innovation and technology. But the main focus for many law firms within the region was first, let's understand other business concepts before applying technology or even thinking about innovation. And the biggest concept that I've seen that has been thriving during the pandemic is business process improvement. That is something, that you always look before applying any type of technology or before innovating. What is the current process? How can you improve it? Who are the stakeholders? And looking overall at the process. So whenever we think, again, about legal technology and innovation, and as Maurice said, and I completely agree with that take, if you apply technology to a bad process, it's just going to be a worse process than you already have. And it's going to be magnified and accelerated with technology. But in Latin America, many law firms took that approach of, let's understand our processes, let's see where the pain points are and how we can improve them. And it could or not use technology, but that was, I would say, the thriving motion in Latin America. Now, on the vision of the US, with many, let's say, law firms that we have helped, I would say attorneys started a new trend, which caught my attention, and is that attorneys now are trying to become more tech savvy, and regardless of age, regardless of if I was born in the 80s, in the 70s, in the 60s, now attorneys know that there's a need for them at least to understand the basics of certain type of technologies. For instance, document automation. How can I get started with a low code or no code platform? So now they're trying to get out of their comfort zone, because again, let's be honest, faculties of law don't teach us about technology or innovation. It's something that you learn during practice. But now many attorneys and many law firms are going outside their comfort zone and trying to explore new technologies. And I noticed this especially on the small to mid-sized law firm, not necessarily on the big international law firms, but at least there's an effort. And on the other side, I saw that in big international law firms, like many of them, and I used to practice arbitration before that, now are willing to make a considered effort on investments for good technologies for their law firms. So I would say those are the three different perspectives that I can offer on Latin America and the US.
Thank you, Mauricio. I think definitely relatable with Malaysia, as we see a raise in this legal tech awareness amongst youngsters, young lawyers, and also we see senior lawyers now on Clubhouse talking about law and talking about the employability of young lawyers, what skills they need to join the legal industry now. So very refreshing to see that. Thank you very much. And Hsiang, how about you? How is Hong?
Hi, Melissa. So, I mean, just before I get started, I just want to say, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm also Malaysian, so I'm really proud to be, at this KL Startup Summit. If I had the chance, I would be flying back, but unfortunately, I'll have to watch you eat your food from a distance. But I think what's already been said, I completely echo. I work for an international law firm as well, so I get to see some of our practices in other countries which have been more forward-thinking in terms of adopting the legal tech and the innovation. I echo what Shanice was saying earlier, that if you have an innovation strategy, then when it comes to implementation, it's a matter of timing. I think that what two things I would like to share, I think in particular, is that more innovation and change has happened in the last year than in the previous 10, right? And our industry as the legal sector is no different, because law firms, lawyers, we're just adapting to the needs of our clients. And so what we've learned is that decisions are really business driven. We're forced to work from home. We're forced to adopt to video conferencing. Ultimately we have to change, otherwise we risk being left behind. So for years, as an innovator, as someone who's trying to implement an innovation strategy, we're trying to show the carrot, right? We're trying to say these are all the good reasons for doing it. Then COVID comes along and it provides the stick. And suddenly when you have the carrot and the stick, you have progress. So for me, it's just a great reminder on change implementation, right? You need to have a compelling why before people will actually change. And then the second thing I think I would say, and again, just building on what the other panelists have said, is that people are more curious now. We see more incoming queries. So instead of me trying to knock on the door and say, listen to me, I think what we're starting to see is people are curious, so they're starting to come and they want to learn and figure out how they can adapt. So it's of course great news for people like us who want to promote innovation. And so what I encourage people to do, my teams, is to say, we need to be even more open-minded. We need to be even more helpful when receiving those queries, because now more than ever, we want to capitalize on this wave of purity and build on it. So those are my 2 cents, and back to you, Melissa.
Thank you very much, Hsiang. I think thank you very much for all of your sharing. I think that from the Malaysia point of view, it's quite different. I think from for example, you guys have the infrastructure, and a lot of law firms have already ready and or already innovating even a little bit. In Malaysia, I think like Maurice said about the system, there is a gap in Malaysia. Although we want to innovate, although we want to adopt new measures, and even if there are new laws that were passed in that year, last year, so that we can have like video conferencing trials and hearings, the law just cannot out fast enough for us to adopt. So hopefully after after this whole COVID thing, we will come out stronger. So thank you very much. Let's move on to Mauricio. I'm actually quite interested when I read about A2J Tech being a social enterprise. I have been actually advocating that to a lot of legal tech startups in Malaysia to go the social enterprise way, mainly because of the regulatory space in Malaysia. So your social enterprise aims to improve access to justice, right? So how do you think access of justice was impacted in the past year? And can you share about how the law firms have raised up to this occasion?
Yeah. First with A2J Tech, and that's why the name A2J, because in English is access to justice. We're very mission oriented and mission focused on access to justice. And when we speak about access to justice, we have to understand it in a broad sense of the world. It doesn't have to be a strict sense of only access to courts or only access to an attorney, but it has many different variants when we talk about access to justice, because with that we mean access to legal information, access to affordable legal services, access to courts, timely resolutions from the court. So there are a lot of components to real access to justice. But to answer your question, how I saw from my experience how law firms, let's say, rise to the occasion on solving access to justice, it was on two different fronts. One, law firms, regardless that they provide services, and many of them on an hourly, let's say, billing, many law firms started to understand how they can improve access to justice by prioritizing certain type of services, meaning that they know that there are some areas or some documents that can be automated, and they don't need to be, let's say, billed by the hour for that specific document or for that specific need. So with that, they did a different approach in the sense, you know what, instead of charging my client $200, $400 per hour, I can just charge $25 for this simple document. Again, it could be in many different areas of practice. Not all law firms did the same, but at least that was one approach based on how can we provide affordable and accessible legal services. And why? Because there were many people that took let's say, a hit on a financial side. Many people lost their jobs, had their hours reduced. So many law firms, you know what? Now it's time for us to be help people in need, besides to say providing the services that we provide, so we can productize certain type of documents or certain type of service. I would say that's number one, which has created more efforts and a more call to action, providing more affordable legal services. The second aspect of this is that law firms also came to the occasion or raised the bar in the sense that they started creating meaningful partnerships and collaborations with many stakeholders within the access to justice community. So they started some outreach to courts, outreach to legal aids, and started to, let's say, discuss how they could help to provide pro bono services, or how they can additional attorneys and staff for some matters on legal aids that legal aids cannot take. For instance, in the US, there's certain limitations into which people can or not get legal assistance on legal aid because you gotta meet a certain threshold. And if you're outside that scope, you cannot receive any legal aid. So law firms also started that meaningful partnership and collaboration with legal aids, again, to tackle access to justice and to breach it. And with that, I would say those are the two main examples, but there are other examples in which help access to justice. We saw a more outreach to their clients and many other examples that I could speak, but I would say those are the two main examples that I've noticed and how law firms have helped access to justice, especially during the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Mauricio. Very interesting to hear how the law firms actually make a product out of, selling their services as products. Were there any, if I may, a follow-up question, were there any resistance from any associations or the regulatory bodies whatsoever?
Can you repeat the question? I think I lost you for a little bit, Melissa.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry. So were there any resistance from any sort of like association or any other external bodies when they start doing that?
I would say there wasn't necessarily a resistance on some of the approaches certain law firms took, but there's I would say an infrastructural resistance overall in the US. because there's a lack of flexibility in some instances of what a lawyer can and cannot do, on who he can collaborate or even create an enterprise. For instance, there are many limitations on an ethical level of creating an law firm with, let's say, developers or graphic designers. Again, that is something that in some cases it's not something that could be done. So now there's a call to action for many regulatory changes for the ABA and the bar associations in general to change some of the limitations to create more innovative solutions that can incorporate or add other professionals that are not only lawyers, but can have a different perspective on how we can provide more innovative and better services. So I would say it wasn't a resistance pushback right now, but there's an overall need for infrastructural changes and regulatory changes to create more innovative solutions to provide better, affordable legal services.
Thank you very much, Mauricio. Aditya, that you have unmuted yourself. Do you want to jump in on this?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's great because we actually have that same problem in Malaysia. The regulatory have to catch up with this. Thank you very much, Mauricio. Aditya, yes. In a law firm as large and global as White & Case, how did your officers across the world respond to the respective movement restriction that is imposed in your various jurisdiction?
Right. So look, obviously, every office, every jurisdiction had its own challenges at different points of time, depending on the surge of the virus. But some impact was felt across the board. And in a firm like White & Case with over 40 offices spread across the globe, there's a lot of effort made to ensure that there is constant messaging from the leadership. And I think that was critical. You always had consistent communication from the top to reassure workforce and reinforce camaraderie. This helped tremendously in my view, because it's again critical to ensure that the firm's values are being applied by everyone across the network, irrespective of where they are geographically based. So just as an example, we have the LIFT program, which stands for Local Innovation Firm-Wide Transformation, which operates as a unifying umbrella of sorts for the legal technology initiatives taking place at the firm. And again, this helps ensure that lawyers and business services professionals across the network are part of the same conversation, and there is uniformity in their approach because of the same kind of training that's being delivered and the same kind of tools that are being available to them. And also, look, you can't underestimate the importance of maintaining ongoing dialogue between the various counterparts across the firm. As I was preparing for this session, I spoke to a wonderful colleague, Bernie Chong, who's a senior professional support lawyer based out of Singapore. And she told me how PSLs across the network, Asia, in the Americas, in the Middle East, in Europe, are constantly engaging and talking to each other to share knowledge, to talk about how frequently they run and execute technology trainings, how we store our precedents, and discuss legal developments. And that is often instrumental in ensuring that despite how far spread we are geographically, our approach and how we deal with our clients and our culture is similar, and the same values are applied by lawyers and business services across the globe.
Thank you very much, Aditya. Very interesting to hear about the LIFT program. Is that something that you have for a couple of years now to maintain so that everybody is on the same page, or is that something new?
Yeah, so it actually started, it was as a pilot program in the UK before the pandemic. But as I think we've all touched on earlier, right, the pandemic gave a great opportunity to then escalate very quickly and apply it and run it across the board. So it's now a critical, I think, element of training and technology use across the firm. But it's been in place for a while now.
All right. How about the precedent base that you were talking about? Because I was actually chatting with my in-house counsel friends and also my friends who are international law firms, and unfortunately, they do not have that bank of for them to kind of share information as and when. They were still emailing to get that particular information from that jurisdiction. Is that
Right.
something that White and Case is working on, or what do you think about that?
Yes, no, we've for many years had this platform. It's called the internet called Connect. I think it's appropriately called Connect, where you can basically access precedents across practice areas and knowledge banks across practice areas from whichever office you're at. So my practice primarily focuses on international arbitration. And I have worked in our New York office for 4 years, London office for 2 years before I moved to Singapore a few years ago. And we have a knowledge bank where every time I do an interesting case or I make an interesting application on a new area of law or a new area of fact, right, I will forward it on to the professional support lawyers, or I have the ability to directly upload it on the knowledge bank or just on an online platform where anyone with a similar query can just enter the search term and get hold of that information. So you don't need to necessarily email your colleagues, while of course that remains an option, to ask about every little new thing that you want. You can just go on Connect, either do a typical word search or go to the knowledge bank of your practice area, which has several folders, and then determine what exactly is the topic that your query relates to and pull up that document. It's been a hugely empowering tool, I would say, which has saved clients a lot of resources, and it just makes our job more efficient and more effective.
Yeah, that sounds really, really useful. Is that developed in-house? That
Yes.
sounds amazing. Wow.
Yes, and it's been around for many years now.
Wow, very amazing. Very amazing.
Certainly, I joined the firm in 2012 September, and it was being used extensively at the time. And as junior associates at the time, we were always told, listen, it's your responsibility to ensure. The partners might be very busy, right? But it's your responsibility to ensure that if there's a new submission that you've drafted or a new application you've drafted, you've prepared a new format of a document that can be used by our colleagues in the future. You've got to make sure you forward it to the professional support lawyers and that it gets on the bank. So I think the firm has, this wonderful culture of sharing, which is, I think, again, critically important.
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you very much for that. I think, yes, any participants, any lawyers in the participants, please remember that. All right, thank you very much, Aditya. Next up, Shanice would like to share about your Create Plus 65, an innovation lab within a law firm. That's amazing. So do you mind sharing with us about how Clifford created this lab and what are the advantages of having an innovation lab in a law firm?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'll start by prefacing this with how a concept of an innovation lab is not certain or a new one, but innovation labs within law firms, they fall into relatively uncharted territory. So Create 65 is Clifford Chance's first innovation lab, and it sits in Singapore. And the name Create actually comes from the wider initiative that the lab is part of, which is our product research and development arm, Clifford Chance Create. So a lot of people ask us what's plus 65. It's actually derived from Singapore's area code. And the entire team, including the lab, is focused on research and development into future ways of working with the legal industry. So you mentioned what exactly are the advantages of having an in-house innovation lab within a law firm? So I think there are three main key advantages, one of which is centralization of innovation, speed of innovation, and how it's a fertile breeding ground for relationships. So for my first point on centralization, I'll start off by saying if innovation is 10% of 100 people's responsibility, then we foresee little innovation take place. But if it's 100% of 10 people's job, then we think that things will start to happen. So in the same vein, we've actually used this motto and delivered over 5 products and initiatives so far within the span of the last 12 months. And we have more to come within our pipeline. So this goes to show that having a dedicated innovation lab allows us to focus our time, attention, and resources on generating impactful new ideas. And it also provides a place for these ideas to be developed and evaluated away from the bureaucracy and short-term pressures of the core business. So, here at Create65, we focus on high impact and strategic opportunities. And the way the lab was set up was also optimal because we were set up with the support of the Singapore Economic Development Board, EDB. And we were also set up in collaboration with the Future Law Innovation Program, otherwise known as FLIP, Singapore Academy of Law. So we had, product milestones to meet, and we also had great support from these external organizations. So on to my second point about speed, which is somewhat related to the first point on centralization. So we talk about innovation at scale, but innovation at speed is, just as important. So speed is partly born of the priority that we put on it, and being able to innovate fast and cheap is definitely a significant competitive advantage. So one key ways we see this is through our prototyping. So most firms, they wait until a product is perfect before they design an elaborate launch. But here at an innovation lab, we test prototypes with end users very early into the process. So we worry less about the possible imperfections, and we focus more on what exactly are the insights we can gain from end user reactions and end user feedback. So what we do is that we incorporate such feedback very quickly into our next design iteration. And then we develop and test another prototype. So what we're doing here is failing fast and failing cheap. So we cut our losses quickly, and we limit the amount of time and effort we waste by going down unproductive paths. So this approach sounds very intuitive and it's very simple, but it's actually quite a difficult path for many large firms because it's largely opposed to the culture of perfectionism and how everything has to be perfect before we show it to the fee earners, the lawyers, or our clients. So what we do is we're actually trying to highlight this approach in co-designing. And on to my last point on how innovation labs can foster partnerships for the future. So all innovation labs, we ultimately need stakeholder sponsorship. And it's absolutely critical that the sponsors are invested and they can clearly see how our lab strategy links to their own business objectives. So this doesn't only apply to internal relationships within the firm, but relationships outside the firm are also a huge necessary element of our success. So here at Create65, we collaborate across a broad ecosystem that includes our clients, startups, government institutions, and other law firms. So we work together to solve challenges that are being faced in the legal industry. Yeah, so those are the key advantages that I see for innovation labs within law firms.
Thank you very much, Shanice. I think very, very interesting, especially how you can be so agile in a large firm, because normally large firm will not be so agile. One follow-up question though, how do you find the collaboration work with clients? How are they responding to that?
So most of our clients, well, what we do is that we run certain design sprints and workshops with them. And it's basically an exercise in design thinking, which is exactly what the kind of mindset that we're trying to impart to our lawyers. So often we see the dynamic between law firms and clients, law firms are the oracle of knowledge. We know exactly, we are kind of the person the go-to people that they can consult for legal knowledge. And, it's not really a collaboration in progress. It's not we're never the people that will ask them questions about their process. We're supposed to know everything. But I think that's the kind of impression that we're trying to change. We're trying to work actively together with our clients to co-design solutions rather than tell them exactly what to do. And it's a very fresh approach that Clifford is trying to pioneer when creating legal products.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, Shanice. I think that I think that innovation cannot happen in a law firm unless you work with all the stakeholders, and the most important stakeholder, for a law firm, obviously, is the clients. So working together with them, making sure that it works for them is very important. So thank you very much, Shanice. Hsiang, another very interesting initiative, Nakota being a tech startup within a law firm. Can you tell us about how it came to be and what are the advantages as well to grow a legal tech startup within a law firm?
Okay, thanks, Melissa. And guys, those listening, please do drop in your questions in the chat or Q&A. We're all very curious to hear what you have to think and say. And I think all the panelists are very eager to share. So So Nakota, right? It's a very unique offering because it's a very small and diverse team of lawyers, engineers, designers, product managers, and we're working together with a common goal to be able to bring legal tech to our clients. We're run like a startup, and we were formed very much with that startup ethos in mind. Some days I'm a lawyer, other days I'm a product manager, sometimes I'm doing business development, and then other days I'm just doing customer support and helping helping to fix problems. So, but before I delve into actually what I thought this audience, people for this Malaysian audience, you might be very interested to hear the genesis of the name Nakota. The word Nakota has its etymological roots as a Persian word, but it's also used in the Malay language to mean a master or a commander of a ship. We like to think of it as a captain navigating a ship into uncharted waters. So there you go, Nakota. And the technology that we create, it's outward first facing. It's for use for our clients, and our flagship product is Create IQ, which is an online contract negotiation platform which streamlines the process of creating, negotiating, and executing contracts. It's designed to and is used by the world's largest companies and financial institutions to help them with their contracting processes and downstreaming of their legal and commercial contractual data. There are many legal tech vendors in the market, but what we pride ourselves on is having built something that is enterprise-grade technology. You know, we built it in-house and we've deployed it into the national markets, and some of the world's biggest banks use it. You know, our clients and customers span the globe from the US, UK, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and many more. And the touch points, our users, they're not only legal clients, but they're also their stakeholders, their business stakeholders. So we've really tried to design something that is all-encompassing and thinking of the entire process end-to-end. You know, I'll come back to Create IQ later on this afternoon, but just to answer the second part of your question, Melissa, which is, you know, one of the biggest advantages of doing this within a law firm is that we have pretty much unlimited access to legal talent. So when we compare ourselves maybe to legal tech vendors and other external startups, I think that's one of the significant advantages. And this particular advantage, you know, it touches on what Shanice said earlier on. You know, we are able to do things with speed, scale, prototype, test. We can do things agile. But fundamentally, what it comes down to is the lawyers understand lawyers. They understand the regulatory changes that is happening, and we're able to deploy things into complex situations. So, for example, our first use case when we launched our product was for financial institutions, for banks, asset managers, funds, and they had to comply with changing regulations in the derivatives industry, in the derivatives sector. So this is complex, and unless you have legal experts who really understand that, then I'd challenge you know, other vendors if they can really meaningfully deploy a solution that can genuinely help customers. So what we like to think is, you know, we're lawyers building for lawyers. It's not only that we understand the substance of the law, but we also know and understand how you do the business of law and what it is that our users actually want when they use our products.
Thank you very much, Hsiang. Very interested to know how do you work with lawyers for Nakota? Are they your lab rats, or are they your consultants, or what role do they play?
Yeah, great question. Actually, the advantage of having something like a standalone unit like Nakota is that it attracts people to us anyway. People are curious. You know, I mentioned earlier about this curiosity wave that we're riding on. People want to come to us and say, actually, how can we help? How can it involve? Particularly the juniors. You know, all of them really want to do something interesting and different like this. So we capitalize on that. I have a very open door policy with people coming in, and I'll always share and try and build that ecosystem within of people who want to learn. And then that's just at the junior level, but also at the senior level. You know, our more antiquated partners, if I may put it that way, they may say that they're not so technologically, you know, inclined, but actually they don't really have a choice. Their clients are asking for it. So lo and behold, actually, if they want to stay relevant, they've got to learn as well. And that's where, again, they'll come to us and say, actually, how can we get involved? How can we do more? How can we help our clients better? And lastly, I just say that, because this is quite a unique offering, it's something that we find our clients are interested in. And so by extension, our partners are interested to be able to talk to our clients about it as well.
Thank you very much, Hsiang. I myself is very interested in what you do. Like, can I volunteer in, when I saw what you when I saw Nakota, sorry. I think I lost signal a little bit here. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you're still there. It's fine.
Can hear me? Yeah, great. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing. Maurice, all right. So it's very funny because when I was in Hong Kong, Maurice was actually organizing the Japan's first legal tech hackathon, and I wanted to be there, but I couldn't because I was in the legal tech roundtable at that time. So can you please let us tell us when you organized this legal tech hackathon, which is right before the entire COVID-19 debacle, I would say, can you share your experience on that? And do you think that the solutions that will be provided by hackathon participants after this COVID-19, will it be substantially different from the solutions that you see in your first legal tech hackathon?
Yes. So thank you for the question. So just to give a little bit of a background, and it's always good to hear what other locations are doing and hearing about sort of Shanice and what's happening in Singapore and Hsiang in Hong Kong. And my frustration with what I saw happening outside in other jurisdictions and not happening in Japan is kind of what led to the hackathon in the first place. And I'm not, we're lawyers, right? I'm critical. And the fact is there's still a lot of 20th century lawyering done in many jurisdictions, but particularly in Japan, there's a lot of 20th century lawyering done. And we're in the 21st century. And I think it's not healthy. It's not healthy for the lawyers. It's not good for the clients. It's not good for the GDP of Japan. So starting in 2015, actually around 2014, I've been on a crusade in Japan to bring in more 21st century lawyering. And this is why I said earlier when I was talking about people and process, because the tech doesn't matter if the people won't use it, or if they don't have the mindset, or if the way that they go about lawyering is 20th century. It doesn't matter with the tech. So I tried first to get people through education and trying to do more competency-based learning. Unlike a lot of the big firms that we listen to here today, Baker and Clifford Chance and Linklaters and others, they have development frameworks for their lawyers. And you come in as a trainee, as a junior lawyer, you go as a partner, and it's a very clear development framework of what it means to be a lawyer in the firm and how to grow as a lawyer. Japanese firms don't have that, seriously. So I tried with that, but that wasn't sexy enough. So I said, what's a sexy way to get people to start thinking about development? Hence the hackathon. And the whole purpose of the hackathon wasn't to try to come up with solutions, because the process is already bad. There's no way we're going to come up with really good solutions. The purpose of the hackathon was to bring lawyers together with engineers. Because the other thing that we always talk about is it's great to do the technology, but if no engineers want to work in the industry, we can't build the tools, right? So you can want to do the tools, but if you can't get the talent, you can't have a product. So I said, let's put together a nice laid back weekend of a hackathon, introduce the hackathon concept. I wanted it to be 50-50, 50% lawyers, 50% engineers. I kept it small intentionally because I had to try to get and recruit enough engineers. So fortunately, I was able, it wasn't 50-50, but it was probably 2/3, 1/3, which was great because that means that there were lawyers interested in trying to bring technology in and thinking about how to use technology, and also engineers really willing to come and work with lawyers and try to work on the types. So for that particular we crowdsourced the ideas, so everyone got to pitch, and then people kind of self-selected on a team based on which idea they wanted to work on, and then they went to work. Most of it was like contract review, some compliance tools came out of that. But now coming out of the pandemic, with people really re-innovating and thinking about how they work, how they need to grow as a person, I'm pretty sure, one, if I did another hackathon, I'd get a lot of participants. And two, I think that the solutions would be quite interesting, because I'm sure that there are people right now that have solutions and wish they could try to bring it to market, but they don't know any engineers. So not on this, maybe in Malaysia, but is anyone interested in any solutions to try for Japan? Let me know. I can talk to you about that.
Thank you very much, Maurice. Very relatable, actually. When I organized the Malaysia's first LawTech hackathon, we had the same problem, and our goal was the same. Our goal was to bring tech people who don't usually talk to lawyers, and lawyers who don't want to talk to tech people to talk to each other. And yes, and also to bring stakeholders such as our bar association to come on board and be part of the conversation. So very excited to see what kind of solutions we have next time. And I think to a more ready market, that is very important. I think one of the more important things now. So thank you very much for sharing, Maurice. Let's talk about jurisdiction, right? How does a jurisdiction that is more, because as we talk about stakeholders, so how does a jurisdiction that is more receptive to innovation can help lawyers and law firms to implement new measures in their law firms? Because even if we want to do that, but we do not have a receptive jurisdiction, we may not be able to do that, right? So Aditya, can you share your views on this?
Sure, Melissa. I think, look, you consider the role of jurisdiction, right? It's worth assessing the dichotomy that exists between large global law firms with thousands of lawyers and a big budget for technology on the one hand, and smaller boutique firms and solo practitioners on the other, right? Because the large firms will manage or may manage just fine without government support because they have the resources. But for the use of technology and innovation in the legal sector to be truly meaningful, the use has to permeate across the sector. If you are looking for systemic change or cultural change, the solo practitioners and boutique firms also need to embrace technology in their practice, right? And this is where governments and bar associations become so critical. And I think Singapore is actually a great example of a jurisdiction that has made tremendous strides in tech and innovation in the legal sector and has a very thoughtful plan of action. For instance, the government has provided funding to law practices to support up to 70% of their first year cost of adopting technology solutions. And last year in October, the Singapore Ministry of Law launched its Legal Industry Technology and Innovation Roadmap, which essentially outlines its plans of promoting innovation in Singapore's legal industry for the next decade. Right? This includes a range of initiatives providing practical assistance to law firms to identify digital solutions, supporting professional upgrading, as well as incorporating elements of technology and innovation in legal education so that the younger lawyers and law graduates get the right training early on. So contrast this with a jurisdiction where, such as India, for example, which is where I got my first law degree before moving to the US, where in large part, at least from the government side, right, issues of technology and innovation in the legal sector are not primarily part of the conversation. So, it is obviously tried then to say that, of course, Singapore will, 10 years down the line will be in a far more, advantageous position to leverage these tools and technology in its law practice compared to a jurisdiction which is not, engaging with these issues, at least at the current moment.
Thank you very much, Aditya. Yes, I agree with you about Singapore's government. I think very lucky to have that. But Mauricio, what do you think about this? Because how receptive is American bar associations and regulatory bodies with innovation there right now?
I would say, again, from looking from two different jurisdictions, two different perspectives. Let's first talk about Latin America. And Latin America, it's different from the US in the sense that they don't have many regulations for attorneys or a stronghold regulations on the ethical level. So that means lawyers can create ventures or startups with designers, with developers, and there are no ethical problems with that. In the US, that's a different story. So if I compare the rate of startups now in Latin America is in exponentially. Why? Because there are less barriers to the entry of that market. Because again, I can collaborate, I can partner up with someone else in a different profession with a different mindset we can collaborate and create something better. Because again, I would say products and solutions come when you collaborate with others, with other professionals, with other, let's say, creative mindsets. But in the US, again, with certain states have certain limitations, the legal tech innovation, let's say, rate is not as high as it used to be, because now legal tech or even new potential projects are finding, let's say, obstacles to saying, oh, look, I can create a legal tech, but I cannot necessarily create an enterprise with a developer or a graphic designer, or we want to create a hybrid model in the sense of having a legal tech product that is going to have an aftermarket service, such as filing, for instance, divorce forms or filing certain additional documents. You cannot necessarily create that type of company or venture with another professional, because there's some, let's say, considerations on that, I think. So there's a direct correlation on the regulation and how you're going to drive innovation and push it forward. As long as you have more, let's say, stringent regulations on how lawyers can act, that is going to limit in some aspects legal innovation. However, if you have other, let's say, perspectives that don't have that many obstacles, I would say there's it is fair to plan for more innovation, creativity, and creating different perspectives on the legal industry in general.
Thanks, Mauricio. I think that's very interesting. There's like an angle perspective problem rather than, switching is crucial in Malaysia as well. I'm sorry, I think that we have lost Maurice, but it's all right. I see a very interesting Q&A question here. Right now.
Actually, Melissa, may I just jump in on that last question just to share a little bit more? Because Aditya and Mauricio both made really great points about the ecosystem and the jurisdiction that is needed to support it. So Singapore, for example, where the Law Society there is really pushing the efforts, and I think your neighbors are watching. So actually, it's great to see all of this, and it's great to have leaders to push that forward, because then your neighbors, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Thailand, etc., will start to see that and actually start to think, okay, what else do we need to do? So you talked about a subsidy, a grant, for example. In Hong Kong, we also have something similar. It's not as big, but it's something better. And so in the spirit of that sharing and that collaboration, it's just a shout out here for organizations like Alita, right, which is actually doing that great work of sharing in the jurisdiction, right? And I think it's so important now. Legal innovation strategy, I'm sure that thumbs up came from Josh. Your strategy, your tech observatory. No, you're not paying me to do this, but I honestly think that that's what will spur on more of this innovation, right? And so I hope we can see more of that. I hope to see more of that sharing and the collaboration, because sure, Singapore might be leading with some ideas today, but if it sparks something else in Japan, it sparks something else in Thailand, then that's what we want as a sector collectively.
Thank you very much, Hsiang. I think very interesting, and also the question asked by Josh in our Q&A section. Something that I think Maurice touched on a little bit just now as well is how can we substantively optimize the relationships between stakeholders that all stakeholders use different work languages and mindsets. Something that, like Maurice said just now, hackathon is a very sexy idea to bring everyone on board, but how do we do that, right? In honestly, from Malaysia's perspective at that time, a hackathon, like Maurice said, a very good idea, because fintech was already blooming and they were using hackathon as so it's not something too new. And then we carried on with events. So what do you think about that? Maurice, do you want to start?
Yeah, no, exactly what you were saying. And one thing that I would do is encourage younger lawyers and newer lawyers to get more involved in the bar associations. And as hard as it will be, try to take on the leadership roles. Because one thing that there are starting to be some changes, like Mauricio was alluding to, some of the different states allowing different types of entities and it's springing up. But also bar associations are starting to require a tech competency. I'm California qualified, and I think now we'll have a tech competency as part of the CLEs that we'll need to do. So if we don't have the base level of tech competency, we can get disbarred or disciplined, right? So I think that having some of the younger lawyers are, and not only obviously lawyers of different ages are interested in tech, but in looking at that, but particularly some that are younger and really thinking about how to start their career, differentiate themselves in their career, get involved in the bar associations to make sure that that comes out as a part of the competencies and the part of the rules. And that in itself will help with some of the investments and some of the support for the organization, or for legal tech organizations and other organizations. Of course, as said, follow Alida and other organizations like that are looking to bring knowledge and bring energy across the region, right? And we have a lot of good stuff in our region, and we have a lot of growth, Asia already, the now and the future. So we can take some leadership globally in some of these areas, and I'm happy to be a part of it, and that's what kind of keeps me excited to stay in the region.
Thank you very much, Maurice. Do come to Asia, and we can work something on together that way. Shanice, do you mind sharing your thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think the main thing is that law firms are looking to hire a different profile of lawyers that will be able to, interact and understand and empathize with stakeholders coming from different backgrounds. So, these stakeholders can include like government institutions, legal engineers, or technologists. So what this example I allude to is that currently, typically, the vast majority of lawyers are I-shaped. So they have very deep expertise in one area, but they might not have the skills or knowledge or experience beyond that very niche domain. Law firms are increasingly looking towards T-shaped lawyers. So these are lawyers that not only have very deep domain expertise in one discipline, but they have various competencies and skills that are complementary in other areas. So for instance, lawyers are now, lawyers with very keen business acumen and great awareness of the commercial context of client issues. Lawyers with the ability to spot opportunities, or with an openness and curiosity and willingness to use technology, they will be more in demand. And this is actually part of the strategy that larger law firms are now adopting, because, having these more multidisciplinary and multi-talented lawyers alongside, hiring specialists from different disciplines like legal project managers, legal engineers, legal technologists. I think this is all part of an effort of larger law firms to kind of empathize and being in a better place to understand client problems and to help them problem solve throughout this process.
Thank you very much, Shanice. Thank you, everybody, for your sharing. I think that's all the time that we have right now. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you much to the attendees as well for joining us today on a Sunday afternoon. Have a nice day, everyone, and let's catch up after this event. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.